About politics. On this Wednesday, we have our three guests who I will now introduce. We have clinical and organizational psychologist and a public relations officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, Kelly McFarlane. In the middle, we have with us Guidance Officer 2 in the Victoria Education District with the Student Support Services Division of the Ministry of Education, Beryl Riley. And at the very end, not that we've thrown him away to the end, but we try to maintain a certain format. We have Solon McDonald, who is the Vice Chair of the National AIDS Coordinating Committee, and we felt it appropriate to include that element in the dialogue. December the 1st, Saturday, is World AIDS Day, and the whole question of sexual activity and AIDS and HIV comes into the dialogue quite obviously. Good morning all, good to have you on the program. Thanks very much for your willingness to participate in our dialogue this morning as we get going with our second season of the Focus on the Family series. So let me just throw it out to you all to give your opening perspectives, starting with Ms. McFarlane. This whole question of sex education in Trinidad and Tobago, from your perspective, where are we at with that?
I think definitely that in terms of sex education, we need more involvement from parents because research actually shows that parents' ideas or values about sex influence children's sexual behaviors more than even their peers, even teenagers. So getting parents comfortable talking about sex with their kids would be the best way to sort of lessen the incidence of HIV and risky sexual behaviors that we see.
And of course that presumes that the parents are there and present to give that sort of counseling and guidance, which is a different discussion in many respects. But let's hear from Beryl Riley as to your own view, because you operate in the school system, you function in that environment. What is your view in relation to this entire question of sex education?
At the Ministry of Education, we do a lot of sex education. Actually, we look at our guidance and counseling curriculum and the HFLE curriculum. And we do a lot of work with regard to sexuality and who am I. And therefore, it is out there. We guide the students. We allow them to understand their bodies, what is happening with them, so that they can know how to respond when situations confront them. We also engage in a number of parenting situations. We speak with parents. We inform them. We give them a lot of information in terms of their students, their children, and how they should work with them. So it is out there.
A lot of questions come to mind already from the early responses, but let me go right across the board to ensure that we get an opening perspective immediately. Solon McDonald, in your capacity as Vice Chair of the National AIDS Coordinating Committee, what perspective do you bring to this dialogue?
There is some education, but we definitely need more. There needs to be greater involvement, as was said, of parents, but also we have to ensure that how we deliver what we deliver, we don't set our children up to be inadequately prepared. Yes, there is some level of movement, and trust me, over the last 20 years, the discussion of sexual and reproductive health, much less sex education in schools, has come a long way. However, we still have a long way to go because we still have youth who aren't prepared for situations and sometimes come from homes, communities, and entire areas where the discussion of sex is about jokes about sex. It's about exposure to ideas of sex that have to do with conquer and prevail and win and trade, rather than being prepared to manage yourself as a sexual being and to effectively navigate different situations.
And I suppose the question is, some may ask, is this discussion even, I'm tempted to say, is it even relevant? But it is relevant. Mm-hmm. But are we, as presumably adults, trying to catch up with a situation that has already gone to a different level, Ms. McFarlane, in the sense that everything is out there on social media, because you might want to protect your children and keep them away from XYZ, but they know X, Y, Z and a lot more already because of what they've been able to access via social media. Even if you try to keep them away from it, somebody is showing them something else already. So I'm just wondering, even as we're having this dialogue, if we are having a dialogue that has already gone past what we're discussing right now.
Absolutely not, because they're so exposed. That's why we have to get in there and make sure that the ideas that they are getting online are realistic, or that they truly understand what they are seeing and what they are hearing and what they are learning. We have to help them so they make sense of it and learn how to filter what is true and what is healthy and what is safe and what is right from what is wrong and what is negative and what is just a fantasy. The media could kind of make sex and sexuality look at, like he was saying, conquer and kind of give you the wrong impressions about it and not teach children that, or teenagers, that a healthy relationship is a good part of having a good, healthy sexual sex life.
And how much of that is impacted, though, on an individual or a parent's own experiences? That this was never talked about when I was growing up. That we didn't hear about these things until much later on. I only find out when I went to school and I see this one come with that and so on and all that sort of thing. How much are parents handicapped by their own experiences?
That does create a handicap, and because now parents don't feel comfortable talking, especially to children, about sex. A lot of people don't feel comfortable talking about sex generally, far less to talk about it with a child. But that's why we have to, or parents need to start talking about sex earlier. And by talking about sex, I mean sex related. So talk about, good touch, bad touch, and work your way up so that you have an open relationship with your kids so that they feel safe and comfortable coming to you when they get to the age where they're actually ready to explore, or they actually have experiences that confuse them or hear things that confuse them. You're already it would make it more comfortable for the parent as well as for the child to have those conversations that are very necessary.
And Ms. Riley, you mentioned that there is that level of sex education in the school environment. At what age does it begin in the school environment? We
begin in the primary school from infant 1. And as Ms. McFarland mentioned, there's a curriculum where we speak about good touch, bad touch. And when we talk about sexuality, it's not just about sex. It's about who am I? Respect for your body. What are you doing? So we start from infant 1. And of course, it is age-appropriate information that is given to them. So many times we have situations where parents may be, they may be a little timid or scared about the fact that we are giving the students this information.
That's what I was going to ask you. Have you gotten any resistance?
We have gotten
from the parent body saying, I don't want my children to hear about this at this age?
Yes, we have gotten some resistance. Of course, when we explain to them, it is not that, like I said, it is age appropriate. So it is not that we are speaking about raw sex or showing them videos that are inappropriate. We are doing the age appropriate work with them. They are understanding themselves, their bodies, because let me tell you something, many things are happening in the homes today and they are exposed. And therefore, when we go into the schools and we speak with them, we are putting it into a particular context. We are educating them. We are giving them the information where they can really put it into the context as to who am I? How should I respond to certain situations that come their way? So when parents hear these things, they begin to feel a bit comfortable, and then we work with them. There are some situations where we have parent and student involvement together, so they get that understanding as to really what is happening.
That's what I was going to ask you, because how much of this information, especially at infant 1, is dependent on a complementary sort of role by the parents, or is it something that exists purely within the school environment, or is there a level of consultation with the parents as well to ensure that the information is disseminated properly?
Well, we work in the classrooms on a daily basis, and when we provide that information with the students, of course, they will go home and they will talk about it with the parents. And of course, if some of them are very uncomfortable, this is when they will come in. But during our parenting programs, it depends on the topic. If we are talking about sexuality, we let them know what the students, what their children are receiving from us. And they ask a lot of questions and they become pretty comfortable because, again, being age appropriate, we do not go beyond what should be in the classroom.
I suppose, Salon MacDonald, when we use the term appropriate, some will say, well, appropriateness went out the window the day social media started because as far as appropriate now, the world is open to every age. But what is your own view as far as this? Are we catching up with technology? Are we way behind? Is there a lot of work for us to do that requires support on all sides?
There is absolutely a lot of work to be done. And I'm glad to hear that the Ministry of Education has taken these strides. Coming from a background of being at the rapport many moons ago where school principals were there to tell you, listen, we can't speak about this. We can't speak about that. We don't want this exposure. We have to catch up. And one of the reasons that we have to catch up is because, as you mentioned, new media platforms and social media have gone to the extreme. Marketing has taken everything sexual and made it commercial. So one of the things that we have to ensure at every point is appropriate information. And when we start with appropriate, we start with, look, your child needs to know
but your appropriate might not be my appropriate.
No, there is no your appropriate and my appropriate. There is an appropriate. You need to know what your body is. You need to know what your genitals are and how to clean them. Your child needs to know the appropriate names of penis and vagina so that when you hear it at 12 and 13, you don't kiki.
Somebody
right?
must have just changed the station and say, I don't want to
Good. Because
watching no show.
Because the reality,
morning.
because the reality is that we have competition for the attention of our children. We have competition, and competition comes in every form that a previous generation has not been prepared for. We have situations where I walk through particular communities and there's a song. A 3-year-old is walking, singing, I don't have a type, bad is the only thing that I like. We know this song. If this is the exposure that this 3-year-old has, think of him being in a state where, hey, this is a song, I like it. Bad is what I like. We're not teaching that young man, hey, don't sing that in front of parents. Because the minute they're going to start to hide, they're going to start to fold away pieces of themselves that parents won't have access to. So we have to be open with the information. Good touch, bad touch, sexual abuse touch. Because abusers have become very sophisticated. Public and private areas of the body, that's appropriate information for your child. Because when we're thinking that in the old days we'd say, well, you know, when somebody touches you sexually, it's going to feel bad. Attention, no, it's not. The moment that a private area of your body has been touched as a child, you have to revert to an adult. And that's what we have to teach. We have to teach them, look, you're too young to keep secrets. And that's part of sexual and reproductive health because we're burdening children with information and with situations that adults of previous generations can barely handle. So we have to ensure that when we give this, we're teaching skills. Sexual possibility situations abound, and we have to teach children about them and how to avoid them. The old, well, okay, let's go to your house and study. They come to my house and study. Nobody's home. You like who, you like who. You're not going to be thinking, well, all right, we'll study biology, or no, we'll start science, or we'll study and start whatever the case might be. That's a sexual possibility situation. And if your child isn't prepared to avoid it, they'll wade into it. Yeah. Our statistics for HIV and STIs as it relates to children between 15 and 19 is abnormally high, and it's been abnormally high for more than a decade. So we have to ensure that we take these steps to prepare children to deal with these scenarios that are going to come up.
And I'm glad you're framing it in that context because, again, not just because of the proximity to World AIDS Day, but there are certain realities that maybe doesn't get enough attention as it should be getting in mainstream media that isn't promoted as far as something that needs to be done. But getting back to the entire perspective of it, Ms. McFarland, from a psychological point of view, if that is the correct term, is it fundamentally about trust? Is it fundamentally about that child having that level of trust and feeling comfortable to say anything and explain anything to that parent? And are we talking about that as well, that situation?
It is about trust and feeling comfortable. And that's why when you start talking about sex and the body and so on from early, it helps the child to feel like they have that safe place to go back to with their parents, that they won't be judged and they won't be, the parent wouldn't overreact or feel too uncomfortable and make the child feel even more uncomfortable. And they know that they have that space that, yes, it's okay to talk about this, because it has to be okay to talk about it, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. So it is fundamentally about trust.
And from your experience, is there a major issue with that level of trust from your interaction and discussion on this and maybe other issues? Are adults of today, younger adults especially, those who have become parents for the first time and have children now going to school and are finding themselves in this sort of discourse, are they equipped to any significant level?
I don't think that they are. And I don't think that, again, they start early enough a lot of time. Because sex could be quite taboo. And then when you see your child as a child or as a baby, and you're not really sure what is the right thing to do? Is it the right time to talk about things? What exactly should I talk about? The child is questioning, where babies come from. Why do adults kiss? What do these things mean? And then parents, even young parents, go into panic mode. What should I do? What should I say? How should I respond to this? And now you have to try to help them figure out, okay, how you should respond to it. Should you respond to it? But younger and younger, again, because of all the media exposure and the music and so on, kids ask questions, and you have to be prepared and comfortable enough to answer those questions.
I mean, and this is the question. I'm trying to get. I mean, you're feeling a little awkward. As I said, we probably just lost a few viewers and listeners when Mr. McDonald mentioned the private parts already. But that is the reality.
Yeah.
Yet still you would have people, and maybe Ms. Riley, you can offer a perspective as well, that people just, whether it's hardwired because of the way they've been brought up, they just prefer not to talk about it. So even talking about it or trying to talk about it, they sometimes say the wrong thing and present it in the wrong way. And this kind of icy kind of awkwardness, it makes it worse rather than making it better.
And the reason for that is simply because as adults, they are not comfortable with themselves. If you are not comfortable with your own sexuality, it makes it difficult to speak to someone. So hence the reason why, in terms of some of the parenting education that we do, we try to let them understand themselves, who they are. We ask parents to partner with us so that they can work with the information that we give to them, because many times you find that they are not trusting in themselves, and therefore they will pass on that to their children. Children, we tell parents, you need to believe your child. And what we have found is that many times, sometimes it might, in a case of a sexual abuse or so, it might be a parent, a mother's boyfriend or something like that. And they do not trust the child. They believe the other person more than the child. And this is where there is a lot of, we have a lot of problems, a lot of difficulty. But when you teach the children to speak the truth, to come out and to understand what is happening with them, and that they should go to their parents, even in the schools, as teachers act in locus parentis. They are the parents in the schools. As guidance counselors, we are the ones that they will go to, and we know that we believe them. And therefore, when they speak to us and they let us know what is happening, 99% of the times it is true. There is some sort of a sexual issue with them.
A lot of issues on the table this morning as we discuss the issues related to sex education in the family structure, in the school environment. Let's try our best to bring back those viewers and listeners who departed when Mr. McDonald referred to those private parts. But just in jest, of course. But no, seriously, we need to have this dialogue, because the world has moved way past feeling queasy and uncomfortable about certain terms. So let's continue our dialogue. We'll take a break and return to the discussion in a moment.
A flop to have to work with a mop.
6:46 in Trinidad and Tobago as the cameras of traffictt.com show us the traffic coming. Let's back up a little bit with our discussion as we focus on the family and talk about sex education with Kelly McFarlane, who is a clinical and organizational psychologist and public relations officer of the TNT Association of Psychologists. We also have Beryl Riley, guidance officer 2 in the Victoria Education District. She's with the Student Support Services Division of the Ministry of Education, and Solon MacDonald, Vice Chair of the National AIDS Coordinating Committee. Mr. MacDonald, during the break we were having this discussion that, you know, people often say, well, it's real bad now. It was never this bad in my time and so on. Shed some light on that.
One of the ways that we escape from this idea of being responsible for what's happening now is that people talk about the eras and they, well, in my days, we didn't have this, and in my days, you know, we were better controlled. No, we weren't. We have had a history of risky sexual practices throughout, but we have to look at the data and the information. Over the past 40 years or so, the rates of teenage pregnancies in Trinidad and Tobago has declined. The rates of different STIs has increased. But it shows that, look, this discussion is relevant and has been relevant 40 years ago because we have a culture of doing the same risk behaviors. If we keep putting our heads in the sand and avoiding the fact that, look, at 11, 12, 13, when you are going through those development changes in your body, you're going to have emotional, physical responses and physiological responses that you have to be prepared for. Otherwise, you're going to keep jumping through windows or have people jump through windows, engaging in practices behind public buildings because the risk-reward relationship is so intense. But we have to look at the facts. We've had these situations in our society for a significantly long period of time. And we have to be realistic about the fact that unless we address preparation via sexual and reproductive health education and the 360 picture and creating the scenario where the institutions, the home, the child, all form one connective net, then we'll go back to different rises in different STIs in teenage pregnancy rates and the rest.
And do you get a sense, I mean, this dialogue is important, and some have commended us for having these sorts of discussions here on a Wednesday as we resume our discussion with our focus on the family. But at the broader level, at the whole level of not just social consciousness, but having this dialogue at the very forefront of any national discourse, are you seeing that happening, or is it just purely in isolation?
It's happening in pockets. It's happening in silos, right? There have been some collaborations. Like, for instance, we've sanctioned at the NACC for a while. We've worked with the Ministry of Education. We've had different NGOs who have experience in bringing out sexual and reproductive health information, because it's not just about the information, it's about the environment that you learn it in. And there are skills and tools that have been important to be able to share that kind of information. But it's not happening in a large enough manner, on a wide enough scale. We have to prioritize it. If we don't prioritize it, we have projections that's going to show you that the 40 to 44 age group, which is your middle management, your 19 to 25 age group, which is your emerging job market, and the newest group for STI and HIV infections over the last 5 to 7 years has been your senior citizens, your retirees. So you have 3 significant blocks of your population that are at risk of having to depend on the state resources to take care of providing medical needs. Whereas if we consistently educate and build skills at an early age, we can avoid it.
You know, Mr. I often wonder if, you know, we were having a discussion during the break, and I was bringing up the issue of the hypocrisy that we engage in, that we have this sort of dialogue and then we behave differently. We behave in a certain way. We talk about doing the responsible thing, doing the right thing, yet we promote irresponsible behavior. Have you ever tried to explain that dynamic where people say one thing but do something else? And I'm trying to bring it to the discussion that we're having, this whole issue of sex education and so on, because, as I said, parents and so on may have a problem with it, but all you have to do is, you don't even have to go to social media, you don't have to go to some behind the door sort of secretive kind of thing. Just turn on mainstream media and it's all there for you to see. So are we really dealing with the issue, and why is it that we seem to think that talking about it is enough without dealing with all the other issues that make it so obvious?
Are you talking with regards to the media or parents, general society?
Generally, I mean, I am as confused as I sound there, because I'm trying the best to make sense of what seems to me to be a highly hypocritical situation. But you guide me along. You try and make sense of it for me.
I guess in the people who do that, do as I say and not as I do, sadly very misguided, because we are social beings and we learn, especially children learn from social interaction. So it's not as simple as do as I say and not as I do.
Yeah.
Because we learn more as we grow up and as our brains develop, we learn more from what you do, right? So I think that comes from, our society, is quite power distant.
But explain to me how I could say, I don't want you listening to that. That's the same thing where he said just about you. I don't want you listening to that. But as soon as you sit down, you turn on you hear the same thing.
Yeah.
You turn on the parents playing the same thing loud.
But we have to be more responsible, plain and simple.
Well, how do you're the psychologist. How do you I'm trying to wrap my head around that an adult can't understand that what you're telling somebody not to do, but you doing it, don't make any sense.
Possibly because they grew up that way. They grew up where their parents didn't necessarily set the example, they just set the ground rules, and you have to follow, or else it's licks or some sort of punishment. And I guess for them, they figure that worked, and that's how it's supposed to be. And if I had to listen to my parents, you better had listened to me. So if I tell you not to do it, I could do it. I'm grown, I can do it. You can't do it, and you just have to know that. And again, it's being misguided and just really not understanding how children really develop and learn. So it's not good parenting, plain and simple. Right?
Ms. Riley, you understand what I'm saying? I mean,
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. However, what we do in the Ministry of Education, we recognize that it is not happening out there. Even with the curriculum and introducing the HFLE program, which is the Health, Family, Life Education program, within that particular program, we teach the children about sexuality. Again, when we talk about sexuality, we are not just talking about sex, all right? Again, who am I? My body, respect what is happening, all right? And therefore, I'm saying that in that curriculum that is being taught on a daily basis, we have introduced it, and children are able to now go home and say, well, mommy, this is what we learned in school, and this is what should be done. Sometimes parents may listen, because if a child comes to you and say, well, daddy, this is what I learned in school, and I think this is the best way it should be done. And that sort of exposure that we are having, of course, they will not speak like that, right? Yeah. And therefore, the parent may be able to say, well, something is happening, and maybe I can learn from my child. Maybe I need to be a better example. Maybe I need to do better than in terms of what I'm doing right now, because they are getting the information. We recognize the seriousness of it, and we are putting it out there so that we can, and it happened, in 2006, in terms of the curriculum and what is happening in the school. So we have put that out there so that the children can get the information and they can pass it on to their parents and their loved ones at home.
But are you seeing the benefits of that?
Yes, and as my colleague here said, that there's a reduction in pregnancy. We are seeing where children are getting the education and they are making a difference. We have mentoring in the schools so that the older ones will mentor the younger ones and pass on the information, try to work with them. So we are developing, and we have developed a number of programs so that the students can understand themselves. Even during the carnival period, we look at carnival safety, because, carnival out there, they are going out and they are told to have a good time. All right, and therefore we are able to say, you can go out there and have a good time, but you need to do it within the parameters, within limits. Therefore, you do not go and expose yourself like that to anybody that comes behind you or in front of you.
Is that possible? I mean, that's where I see the contradiction. I mean, Mr. McDonald laughing already.
Yeah.
I know, I'm trying to understand, if I could just get a quick perspective from Ms. Riley before I bring in Mr. McDonald once again. Is it possible to tell a young man, a teenager, male or female, you need to control yourself when you're in that free up environment. Don't mind the whole of the country telling you to free up and wind up and get on and take a little wine and all that kind of thing, and nothing wrong, get a note from somebody, say I have permission to wine and so on. Is it possible? Does that even sink in to a young person? You have to respect yourself and your body, tralala, when everybody doing something else.
It is possible. It is possible for zero. And I'm saying that when we educate them, you're not just talking about sex and whatever. When we talk about the effects of what you do out there, it is possible. So you find that someone can go out there because they say it is our culture and it's carnival and stuff like that, and they go out there and they see a lot of things. There is a law, I think, where you can't go behind someone and wine.
That's why I brought up
Yeah, they get
the thing about the
permission to
permission.
wine. But in spite of that, we teach the students that if you do not feel that someone should do that to you or violate your space, you have that right to say, do not come behind me, do not violate my space. And we teach them to go out there and have healthy fun.
So, is that possible? That sounds like spitting in a hurricane to me.
It's not about spitting in a hurricane. We have to be realistic. We live in a sexy country, in a sexy region of the world with a sexy culture. And yes, part of it.
That's a whole discussion about whether it's even culture. Eh? But
no, but
anyway,
it is. Because remember culture
I don't know if
teaches you
we
how
seem to be
to-
legitimizing nastiness, but
No,
go
it's
ahead.
not about legitimizing nastiness. We have to be realistic. There is a body of perceptions and there are realities. The reality is we allow ourselves to do whatever and engage in a particular culture. What we have to do, though, is understand that as you prepare your child, you can say control how many times you want. If you don't teach them skills, you could speak yourself into a coma. And they will be whining at your bedside.
No, but so
you have to teach. No, and this is it.
Yeah.
Comprehensive
So
sexuality
this discussion
education.
is pointless then.
No,
You
it's
said
not
that-
pointless.
Yeah.
It's not pointless.
No, it is not.
Comprehensive sexuality education is what will take care of your children when you are not there. Good? We have to understand, somebody going to wine. But the idea is, a wine doesn't mean that it's free reign to have sex. Or it's free reign for somebody to touch you privately in a way. Good? Wine and go home, if that is the situation that you engage in. We have to not be shy about saying words like condom. And be realistic about the fact that, look, if we are comprehensive in our approach, we prepare our youth for various circumstances and situations. You will walk through carnival. You will feel euphoria. Environments create situations.
I still stuck, the phrase
Yeah.
wine and go home still stuck in my head. Eh?
No, but it has to be
I'm
a
trying
part
to
of how you,
imagine-
because it has to be a part of how you understand, because there are people that whine and go home, and you leave because you know, look, this is not the condition that you want to remember tomorrow. You were in a situation, yes, you were euphoric, yes, you had some fun, but here's what, you understand that in this situation, this is your barrier. This is what you're not going to do. Added to which, we have to not get into the phrase or frame of mind where we're saying things that make some people feel inadequate, or we stigmatize particular groups. We have young people who were born HIV positive and who weren't expected to live. So what are we going to tell them when we talk about prevention? Well, prevent HIV from getting... No, we have to be realistic about the fact that, look, you have HIV, or whatever the case might be. Good? There's a body of restrictions. Be careful. Watch out. There are risks that are there for you because if your immune system is compromised, there are things that can get you. Hepatitis is significantly more contagious than HIV. But we don't speak to young people about the fact that, hey, listen, in a hot, sweaty situation, sweat could be your enemy.
Yep.
And we have to be comprehensive in preparing children for situations. We can't have people in situations where you walk around with your head down in the middle of a party. You are going to be seen as a victim.
It's 7 o'clock on the dot. I think we have to take a break at this stage as we return in the second hour. We still have some time to go with our discussion this morning, which is why it's so easy to stay away from the politics on this Wednesday, because we're discussing with some really serious issues, this time in our focus on the family, sex education, attitudes, perspectives, maybe hypocrisies, well, realities, and so many different issues with our panel this morning. And hopefully you're finding the discussion quite informative. We'll be back right after this.
International Year of the Child.
Let's continue our free flow in our discussion this morning in the resumption of our family focus series. We're talking about sex education. We also are bringing in the whole perspective of STDs and all of the different issues associated with it. HIV, AIDS. World AIDS Day comes up on December the 1st. That's on Saturday. So we have that element of the dialogue as well with our three guests. Kelly McFarland, clinical psychologist, and public relations officer, clinical organizational psychologist and public relations officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists. We also have with us Beryl Riley, who is Guidance Officer 2 in the Victoria Education District with the Student Support Services Division of the Ministry of Education. And the other person with a very, very long title, not as long as the others, Solon McDonald, a Vice Chair of the National AIDS Coordinating Committee. Good morning again to you all. And thanks again, we really appreciate you all taking the time to have this discussion with us. And maybe I've railroaded the discussion in certain ways and so on, but during the break we were discussing among ourselves so many different issues as well, yet it almost always seems to come back to the parent. Comes back to the issues of parenting, whether it's the parent in the actual biological parents or whoever happens to be the adult or the foster parent or whatever. Mr. McFarland, is it too simplistic to say that at the end of the day, never mind all the influences, all the social media, all the friends at school, all the different influences, that it still comes down fundamentally to the role of the parent?
It might be a bit too simplistic because the parent now has to also know what is out there. You have to know what your child is exposed to. You have to know who your child is exposed to, what your child is listening to, who their friends are, what the latest slangs are, so you can know what your child is talking about when they're talking to their friends.
You're right, because sometimes you lose track of what the discussion is.
Exactly.
And what you think is a healthy discussion really is not all that healthy.
And things change. So just as Mr. McDonald was saying earlier, in my time, this happened, this didn't happen. Whether it happened or it didn't happen, you as a parent, your specific experience was this. But a child in today's world, their experience is different. They have different pressures. And you have to be aware of and sensitive to the pressures that your child has that are different from what you might have had. And I've spoken with teenagers who they always say their parents don't understand. And teenagers would say things like, oh, my parents are older and it was different for them and they didn't have this and they didn't have that and they just don't understand and they refuse to talk to their parents because of it.
But it appears that it's always been that way. Teenagers always say, my parents don't understand me.
True. Generational gap.
They've been saying that.
So I guess it's learning how to talk to your kids because it comes back to the child wanting that from their parent. But my advice is that the parent should also know, what the current generation that their child is in, what they're experiencing, what their pressures are, what their trends are, and so on. And so that would help create a good relationship, good communication, a good bond.
And Mr. Riley, is it expecting too much of the education system to be part parent? Because some people have that view, maybe teachers would have that view increasingly as well. If parents don't want to do their job, I must do it for them?
Well, it is not too much because we act, like I said, in locus parentis in terms of being the parent in the school when the child is not at home. So they look up to the educators, they look up to the teachers and the principals, the deans, they look up to everyone in the school. However, parenting is very important. Now we say to parents, or parents may say, well, nobody taught us to be a parent. And therefore, we teach people to be parents. How do you parent a child?
Nobody taught you to be a parent?
No. Is there any school out there to say, well, a parent in school really?
Parenting is life. But
it is a difficult thing. It is difficult to parent a child, especially now in 2018. It is difficult, and it is becoming more and more difficult to parent a child.
Is it becoming more difficult, or just that people don't prioritize parenting and they're too busy trying to do other things? And rather than being what a parent should be.
The thing about it is that when you look out there and you see so many things are happening, so many things are thrown at the children, every day you have to come up with a strategy as a parent to work with your child, to understand, and therefore to know what is out there, to hear the different trends, even the slangs as was said. All right, and if you don't understand these things, it becomes difficult. A child may come home and ask a parent something that is really out of the park. And a parent might be stunned. What on earth are you asking me? But it's the reality of the child, and they need to know. Children want to hear, and they want to know, and they want to learn. And therefore, parents need to be taught how to be parents. So therefore, we have a lot of training with them. Because sometimes they will say, well, you know, miss, well, we don't know what to do. You get that all the time. Mm. Well, you know, well, they're not behaving, they're not listening, and I tired talk, and I really don't know what to do again. Huh? You hear things like that. And therefore, when they get the information in terms of how they should respond to their child, because they are growing and understanding the different developmental stages of their child, then they are better able to cope with it. And then we have younger and younger parents today. And they themselves are children, you know.
Yeah, children making children.
Correct. And therefore, they are trying to manage themselves.
Although, as Salon McDonald said, the numbers are actually downward, trending downwards as far as teenage pregnancies.
Yes.
But,
they are young.
I mean, you were telling your own story about the role of your mother and keeping you balanced in that perspective. But are we talking about exceptional circumstances, or are we more or less realizing that what we think of as good parenting is the exception rather than the rule?
I don't think it's about it being the exception. I mean, children today and parents today have a host of different things competing for what's key in your relationship. We have scenarios where your job mightn't give you the time to be with your child. Whatever you're pursuing as an education because you want to learn better, your child has interests. So we have seen a model of what a society is supposed to be that basically hands your child off to various people that you trust have their best interests at heart.
Although we are seeing, and just remember the point that you're developing, although we are seeing in so-called first world societies where more and more in the Scandinavian countries, they are giving parents, working parents, more time to be parents.
Now this is where I'm going, for the simple reason that we are looking at a model that is destroying the very social fabric that we talk about is important for proper parenting and proper raising a child. In countries that have realized, listen, okay, money was important, but we're losing our young people, and we're using our young people to wholly preventable scenarios. There are offers where parents have an amount of time to work from home. They're giving you more time, rather than trying to steal 16 hours of labor out of you. Good? We have to understand that there is something wrong with that. And that puts a lot of pressure on people. Meanwhile, we have other people becoming experts on our children. And the people who are becoming experts on our children are the people you don't want. At any one point in time, they need our attention. And that must be understood, and our guidance. We ourselves sometimes have to realize, look, we need guidance and support. Good? In 2001, a parent walked in to the rapport and said, listen, I have a problem with this child. This child doesn't want to study the work. She only wants to study being a DJ. I said, what do you mean? She only studying about connecting wires to the box and making sure the banana clip fit. We had to pull that parent aside to say, listen, your child doesn't want to be a DJ. Your child and other children are using coded language to talk about sexual activity. And that's what's happened at everything. The moment we start hiding from children and saying, no, we won't expose them to this, the exposure is already there. It is better that you are able to filter it and create situations that you could come and deal with it, because every generation in Trinidad and Tobago has come up with code words for sexual activity from very young. And that's because our parents and elders, by and large, didn't want us talking about sex and didn't talk about it. The moment you make, what's the phrase? Forbidden fruit tastes sweetest. Yeah. The moment you start hiding and talking about it, you're doing it. It's evident you're having children. It's evident people are turning up. We have to change that idea and ensure that, look, the codes that are being developed to talk about sex include us And I have to say us because I'm now 43.
You're a little
But
boy,
we-
man.
You say the nicest things. But we have to ensure at every level, even when we entrust, like teachers, we have to remember that the teachers that we entrust to teach about it are people themselves who came through comfort or discomfort, and you have to be given skills. One of the most important things that we miss about understanding is that comprehensive sexuality education deals with skills. It deals with ensuring that the moment you come into contact with this situation, there's been some rehearsal in the mind. There's been some preparation. There's been some exercise that you've done, or some simulation, or some body of knowledge that you've turned into usable knowledge, that you will be able to navigate this situation comfortably. Because again, we talk about, we think that sex education is just this thing that deals with sex. And we're not understanding that, look, the world you live in is throwing sex at your children.
Sex is your life. Sex is life.
We have replaced our lexicon or our vocabulary. We stopped telling children they're beautiful. We're telling them they're sexy. Why? We understand the context of sexy and the context of beautiful are worlds apart. And we have to ensure that we don't give too much adult responsibility to our young people because, quite frankly, they can't handle it. And then we have to look at the environment that we're operating in. Our healthcare can't do things like say, you know what, you're under 12. I can't treat you if you come in with an STI. Good? We don't make that distinction if they come in with a broken leg or bleeding arm. So we have to address those structural things because our institutions have to help with the parenting, because the responsibility for ensuring that this next generation doesn't go into oblivion or doesn't lose everything by virtue of thinking like 60 years ago. I know old men who have a ton of clinic cards, and it's a matter of machismo. They talk about the number of times that they went to get treated for an STI, and they'll pass on that value to the younger men in their midst.
And you mentioned that earlier, that actually that is one of the age groups where the numbers are trending upwards.
When we saw that the reduction in new infection was taking place in the youth, okay, good. Then you looked at the fact that older men and older women, 50 plus, 55 plus, they were the new trending rate of infections. So you're dealing with the fact that things we didn't deal with, and education and skills that we didn't impart at that juncture, is impacting the society now.
We have a few minutes still left, another 20 minutes or so in our discussion, and I'd like to get from you as well, apart from your own very frank and forthright and appreciated views on this situation, your own recommendations as well as to what can we do. If we're talking about the issue of sex education, are we talking about infrastructure? Are we talking about mindset? Are we talking about dialogue? I sort of want to leave it to you all as to what sort of recommendations would you make if we are agreed that what is happening right now is not an ideal situation, that there needs to be improvement, significant improvement, if we're talking about issues related to sex education? Ms. McFarlane, and again, it's an open question. You can take it in whichever angle you would care to. What recommendation would you bring to this sort of dialogue?
I think definitely discussion groups in terms of, okay, I can't remember which ministry or ministries do have free courses around. They could probably implement some sex education courses, and then parents can send their kids or accompany their kids to these programs. There could be also courses for parents to learn what they should and at what stage talk to children about sex and their bodies and so on. Just information about different options that parents have. If you really, really feel like you can't handle a conversation like that with your child, and you take them for their checkups at the doctor, perhaps, the doctor can kind of start talking to them about it to kind of help it, but just make sure it gets done.
And from your own interaction, especially with young people and so on, do you get the sense that they are yearning for that better and more trustworthy level of interaction with their parents?
Absolutely.
Or is it that they kind of write off their parents, they're more interested in their peers in that sense?
It's funny because it comes across as if they have written off their parents, and my parents just don't say, I don't really care. But it's actually because they are yearning for that. They wish they had that, and children see their parents as their safest sources of everything. Just that they provide them their most security, their most safety. They trust them the most, but they mightn't feel like they can. They're understood by them, or parents might be a little too controlling, and so on and so forth. But children do yearn for their parents to be the ones that they can talk to. They just don't feel comfortable with it a lot of the times.
Which is a whole, it just brings up the of that communication and the gender gap, not the gender gap, the generation gap that we often find ourselves discussing. Ms. Riley, what would be your recommendation? What do you think could make a difference, if there is to be a difference to be made?
I want to agree with Ms. McFarlane in terms of parenting. It is very important. One of the things I would like to see is that parents come out to the meetings that are called, because sometimes they are not available. But I am saying that if they are available and they make themselves available to their own children, allow them to see that they are there, they are accessible, that they can, you can talk to me, tell me whatever you want. And that you will not be, judged based on what you tell me. Children need to feel comfortable about those things. And if a parent says that to their children at a very early age, come to me, I will believe you, come to me, we'll have that discussion. I believe that the children, they will be able to go to them. It will make a difference. It will change a lot of dynamics, change a lot of things that are happening. And again, I want to really emphasize that when we talk about sexuality and sex, it's not just about sex and having sex. It is about your body and respecting your body. I mean, I cannot overemphasize that point, because again, in terms of the taboo and what people think that we are talking about is just sexual intercourse or anything like that. No. Sexuality is about your body. Who am I? And if they start at that point and understanding themselves, it makes a difference. So that I would like to see more parental involvement.
I'll get back to a question that comes to mind immediately in response to what you would have just said, Ms. Riley. But let's take a break, because we're coming up towards 7:23 in Trinidad and Tobago. Still a few minutes left with our guest. We'll be back right after this break. As we return to our discussion with our three guests, and Beryl Riley was making her point about the meetings and parents coming to the meetings. And I was going to ask you the question, Ms. Riley, in the modern environment, is it possible via social media, whatever, to take that information to the parents, or or parents to making themselves familiar with their child's issues rather than waiting for the child to come to them? What's your perspective on that?
We can do that. We can, and what is happening now with media and WhatsApp groups, you find that a lot of information will go out to the parents. So even though sometimes they can't come, we will take it to them. So we put all this information out there. We try to give them a lot of leaflets. Even in the classroom, when we work with the students in the classroom, we give them a lot of information to take home to their parents. So even if your parents cannot come, we will give them information and they can take their parents and have that discussion. And sometimes when the parents come to us, they would acknowledge the fact that they would have received that information, and they are able to have some level of discussion with them, and so it can work in that way, but there are programs out there that can help the parents. I know of a few of them that are out there, but, again, because of the fact that they are busy, and we want to ask parents to make themselves available to their children. Because if a child comes home and mommy is not around or daddy is not around, and by 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock when they come in, the child has to go to bed, there is no communication, no interaction. The child would not be able to say, well, this is what happened to me today. Something happened in school that I'm not happy about. And they are unable to have that discussion because parents are busy, we are unavailable. And I'm saying while it is a difficult job, you are a parent. And therefore you need to parent a child. We are not just mothers and fathers out there. We are parents, and there is a huge difference.
Salon McDonald, I'm interested in hearing your own recommendation because, I mean, but before you even do that, are you optimistic? Because the reason I ask that is because my younger daughter beats up on me all the time, up to yesterday, but you're so negative. You're like a dark cloud. You're like a walking dark cloud all the time. You're so negative about everything. But I say it's only I'm only reflecting what I'm seeing. But I mean, are you actually, do you have a sense of optimism that we can actually even begin to...
I have a strong sense of optimism. The challenge is heavy, and I won't be the one to sugarcoat it and say it's an easy thing. However, over the last 23 years that I've been involved and we've been doing things, I've seen changes. HFLE, trust me, this HFLE discussion and it being taught in schools, this was a war with schools and the Ministry of Education. At one point, there has been movement.
HFLE being Health and Family Life Education. Yes.
We're moving towards achieving comprehensive sexuality education within schools taking place. That's been a movement. So there is optimism. There are still a number of community-based organizations that are reaching out and in larger numbers with younger people, so that peer-to-peer reach is definitely there. We need to do more, though, in terms of looking at our institutions and our legal frameworks. We can't create situations where we know we have gaps, they've been mentioned throughout, where children aren't prepared or they fall into situations. If they fall into that situation, our legal framework, which has been used as sort of a shield by some healthcare professionals to say, look, I can't give you this information or I can't treat you unless you come back with an adult. If we understand that the reason they ended up in this position in the first place is because there isn't an adult who took the time and space to ensure they were okay, so why aren't we treating with them and involve them in something which then gives them these skills? Because they've explored life. And life teaching
why
you gives
is
you
it
that
so
example.
difficult then? I mean, sorry for interrupting you.
Yes.
But what does bite me all the time is when people tell me this ought to be happening and this ought to be done. And it ain't happening. So why keep telling me ought?
Responsibility for things is not our big forte. We live in a region where personal risk perception, the idea that I am responsible for what happens, is lowest in possibly the planet. So we have to lift that. We have to teach the skills. We have to ensure that the environment that we create is an enabling one. We have to make sure that a child could present at a health clinic, a child could present at a center and get met with service. If service ranges from treatment of an STI to the provision of accurate, comprehensive information that you realize, if I realize as a healthcare professional, this child has an STI, you didn't pick it up by picking up a lunch kit. Good, something sexual happened.
Yet that will be seen as sanctioning that type of behavior by providing services to deal with it.
We're punishing children for being unprepared, and it needs to stop. If we feel like it's sanctioning, then what we are doing by denying the provision of service and denying the comprehensive sexual education is that we're setting them up for it to happen again. 4 to 5% of the teenage pregnancies that we have are presenting HIV positive in young girls that were not born positive. What are we sanctioning there? Good? We are seeing sexual abuse in its most sophisticated forms because we haven't given the comprehensive sexuality education. Good? And we can't stand and pontificate about, well, we should be doing this. Let's do something practical. Let's create that enabling environment to ensure that, you know what, these institutions that were working, the rapport in its current form has been severely scaled back. The model it initially started in, we should have about 45 rapport centers because SSST can only do so much. There are how many of you officers now? 40-something?
No,
50,
no.
60?
We have 100 and
awesome.
something.
100 and something to how many schools?
109 guidance officers, and
Currently,
we have about 300.
to how many schools?
We have one guidance officer for each secondary school, and in the primary school, we have one guidance personnel to 3 schools. We also have the school social workers, we have the
Awesome.
special education people.
So that's a reason to be optimistic, because I remember the days when.
But is that enough?
So we
Is
know-
that still enough in the one? Okay, for example, one
in the
guidance
grand scheme of
per
things,
so-
we need more.
Yeah.
And we need to also put resources into structures that work. School children need to have places that they can just go, be, get education, interact and interface with a peer. We need more peer-to-peer model things so that, you know what, children don't need to hear an adult all the time because they don't listen, because they speak different languages. Someone who is a peer to you, that speaks the same code as you, that understands and has the training to know how to elicit information from you, but also to share bite-sized pieces and give you skills. Those are the things we need. We need to prioritize the development of our youth by ensuring that, look, we have to allocate the resources necessary to ensure that the structures are supported, to ensure the legal environment gives the kind of support that we need, and ensure that we can't have emotion and how people feel being the core determinant on what you share, because people have access to information.
Ms. Rowell, I know you wanted to say
Yes,
something. Yeah.
I really want to say that in terms of the Ministry of Education and Student Support Services division, we work with the students. And in every primary and secondary school, we deliver our curriculum, which includes sexuality and sexual health. Also, in terms of the HFLE program in the schools where the teachers themselves deliver that curriculum, which includes, again, sexuality and sexual health. So I want to really emphasize the point that we are there. We are working in the schools. Students come to us. They look up to us in terms of what is happening out there. The school social workers, they go out to the homes. When we recognize that there are issues of sexual abuse and to that effect, we go to the homes. The school social workers, they do that. So I want to really let the public know that we are out there. We are doing the job. And we are getting it done, and we are seeing a difference.
All right. Well, I was going to make a political joke, but I promised myself not to say anything to do with
Thank you
politics
for zero.
during the course of this morning. Time has run out on us, unfortunately. But as you can tell, when we're having a discussion like this, so many issues come up that we never have enough time to really go into great detail with. But hopefully, we've been able to, for what it's worth, continue or resume or restart or kickstart the discussion and hopefully we can take it to another level. Thanks very much everyone for participating in our dialogue this morning. I really appreciate you taking the time from what I'm sure are very busy schedules to focus on our discussion and our resumption on our focus on the family series. We'll take a break and continue with one other interview segment during the course of this morning.